Hi, I'm Jeff Colton. In this video, we're going to go through Activity 7.6 from the Accounting and Financial Management course materials. This is an activity that gets us to consider how we might implement an activity-based costing system and the effects that might have on our calculation of profit for particular products. We've got a firm here with three products, A, B, and C. We're given a little bit of information about sales, direct materials, and direct labour, as well as the overhead costs that have been allocated to it using a traditional allocation or application system. We're also told about a number of activities that our products are going to be using in terms of setting up this activity-based costing system. The overhead costs that we have are what we're going to need to apply. We've got depreciation, machinery maintenance, we've got scheduling, we've got machine setup, and we've got rents, rates, and insurance. It's this $103,250 that we're going to have to allocate. The first thing we're asked to do is to calculate the application rate of overhead using an activity-based costing system. So the first thing we're going to be thinking about is, what are the various cost drivers that are going to cause variation in these overhead costs? So the overhead costs that we've got, I'll just copy those down here. That's the depreciation, maintenance, production, machine setup, and so on. So the first thing that we want is our cost drivers. We're then going to be thinking about, given those cost drivers, what's going to be the overhead costs that we're actually going to be applying? That's the overhead costs that we already have in column G. So I already know what those overhead costs are going to be for our 5 components. The next thing I'm going to be interested in is the level of activity that we've got for each of these costs. And finally, that's going to allow us to determine the cost per unit that I'm then going to apply to the various products. So we need to think, what's likely to cause variation in depreciation? Well, given the information that we have further up in the spreadsheet about production, batch size, area occupied, machine hours per unit, and selling price, the one that I think is the best candidate is going to be the machine hours. It's the level of usage of the machine that's going to cause variation in how much we should allocate on the depreciation. So machine hours is what I'll be using as my cost driver here. If I then think about maintenance and machinery, a similar logic's going to apply. The maintenance of machinery should be allocated to the various products that we've got on the basis of how much machine time they use. So machine hours, again, is probably going to be the appropriate activity or the appropriate cost driver. If I'm thinking about production scheduling, here I'm going to be thinking about, I've told the number of units and I'm also told the batch size. So in terms of thinking about what's going to cause my scheduling costs, it's probably going to be the number of batches that's likely to be important. So that's going to be a combination of the number of units and the batch size per units. The machine setup is going to use, again, a similar logic. I'm going to be thinking about the number of times I need to set up my machine. So again, it's going to be relating to the batch size and the production in units that we're making. But I guess it's important to note here that for product A, we're not using any machine hours. So it's a product that requires some work, but not any machining work. So I'm going to distinguish between production scheduling and machine setup. So I'll put here machine setups. And then finally, rents, rates, and insurance is going to be driven less by the batch size, less by production units. Of all of the information that we have, or I think the one that's probably going to best capture it is going to be the area occupied. So we're allocating rent, allocating rates and insurance on how much of our factory space we're using. So area occupied is what we'll use here. Now I need to think about what's going to be the level of activity that we've got. So the level of activity, I need machine hours, I need batches, and I need machine setup. So what I'll probably do, I'm going to put in a few rows here just so we can make clear exactly how we're working this out. So let's work out machine hours overall. So the number of machine hours is going to be the machine hours per unit multiplied by the number of units. And I can then copy those across. I probably want to get a total here as well. So I'll just put in the sum total here as well. So I've got 17,600 machine hours. The second thing that I wanted to calculate was the number of batches. So the number of batches is going to be a function of the production in units divided by the batch size. So again, I can copy that across. So I've got 1,106. And we know that the total of that is going to be 1106. I then wanted the number of machine setups. So number of machine setups. In this case, I'm only going to do setups that involve machine hours. So because product A has 0 machine hours, it won't involve any setups. So in this case, it's going to be 100 batches and 6 batches. And that's going to give me my 106. So again, the distinction here between batches and machine setups is that batches is going to be all of our units that we're producing. The machine setups only going to be the number of setups that I need for the products that require machining. So that's product B and C. And the last thing that I'll want is I'll get the total area occupied, because that's another variable that I need. So now I've got my level of activities. So machine hours was the 17,600. Machine hours again, 17,600. The number of batches was the 1106. The number of machine setups was 106. The rents, rates and insurance was the total area. That was the 450. So I'm now in a position where I can determine what the cost per unit of activity is. So 15,000 divided by the level of activity. So it's 85 cents per machine hour. I'll just make this a little bit wider so we can see what's going on here. So 85 cents, the maintenance of machinery is $2.56 per machine hour. Production scheduling is allocated at $11.30 per batch. Machine setup at $148.58 per machine setup. Rents, rates and insurance at $33.33 per metre squared that we're occupying. So now that I've got that, I can go back and I can work out the second part, the new gross profit per unit of each of the three products. So I've got the sales revenue, and I'll do product A, product B, product C, and we can get a total. And let's put all of those in bold. Sales revenue, it won't have changed. It's the same sales revenue that I've had before. The direct materials and the direct labor won't have changed either. In fact, let me move that across so that it's consistent. So direct materials and direct labor, I'm going to get direct materials and direct labor, because again, the direct materials and the direct labor aren't going to vary based on the way in which we apply our overhead. Now, what we're going to have is overhead, and I can probably put a capital on. So overhead, and why don't I do this? Let's copy out our various overhead categories and we'll put those here. So we know that for product A, the depreciation is going to be allocated. It's depreciation, 85 cents multiplied by the number of machine hours, and it's 0 for product A. I'll probably think about hard coding in. If I hard code in, so what I'm going to be thinking about for the depreciation. So for depreciation for product A, I know there's no depreciation because there's no machine hours. But for product B, the depreciation is going to be a factor of. It's going to be 85 cents per unit, and let's hard code that in because I might need that again. And I've got the number of machine hours for the product, 8,000 machine hours. So 6,818. And I probably don't need all of those decimal places. I'll then do the same thing for product C, where I've got the 85 cents multiplied by the number of hours, the 9,600 hours, that gives us 8,182. So depreciation, maintenance of machine. The maintenance of machine is the $2.56. And again, I'll hard code that so I can copy the cell across. $2.56 by the number of machine hours. And again, 8,000 for product B. Get rid of those decimal places. Of course, Excel never likes us doing that. We always get this the wrong way. And we'll do the same thing for product C. So for product C, we can see again, I've got the cost per unit of activity times the number of hours, which is the activity. When I'm looking at production scheduling, here's where we will have some costs for product A. So production scheduling we know is going to be applied at the rate of $11.30. It's $11.30, and we're going to be multiplying this by the number of batches that we have for the product. The number of batches here is 1,000. So we've got 11,302 is going to be the production scheduling costs. And again, I can copy that across because I've got the hard-coded cost per unit in there. The next item that I've got is the machine setup. The machine setups is going to be on the basis of, and again, I won't need this for product A, it's only product B and C that you're using the machines. I'll hard code that in by hitting F4, multiply by number of machine setups. So the machine setups, that was number 100. It was 100 setups for product B, and we remember it's going to be 6 setups for product C. So we'll copy that across. The last one we've got is rents, rates, and insurance. We're applying that at $33.33, and we're doing this on the basis of the area occupied in square meters. Again, let's get... So now we've got all of our overhead has been allocated. So what we want to do though, we just want to check that we've got this correct. So total overhead, we're going to add up. So the overhead is going to be everything that we've allocated under that overhead category. Let's again get rid of those decimal places. We've got 17, just under 18,000, 48,000 and 37,000. Now what we might want to do is let's just calculate some totals, and we can calculate some totals down here. I'll calculate some totals down here and down here. And importantly, look at this number. The number that we're looking at here, the 103,250, is matching the 103,250 that we're trying to allocate. So we know that at the very least we've allocated, we've applied all of the overhead here. So what we can now do, we've got our total overhead, the 103,250, and we can now calculate, let's calculate total costs. So the total costs is going to be the materials and the labor and the overhead. And again, materials, labor, and the overhead. And we know that the total cost 513,250. That's going to allow us to calculate our gross profit. Our gross profit, of course, is going to be the sales revenue for each product less the total costs, 132,000. And we've now got a loss of 1,020 on product C. The final thing that we're asked to calculate is the unit gross profit. So what we'll need here is the number of units, just so that we can get that calculation sort of quickly and easily, and the gross profit per unit. So the number of units that we have, let's scroll back up. Number of units, number of units, number of units. Production units, that's in row 15. There we go. The gross profit per unit is 132 divided by the 15. So what we've now got is, let's just do that for completeness. What we now have is a gross profit per unit of $13 for product A, $13.20 for product A, $2.93 for product B, and a gross profit that's negative, or a gross loss per unit, of 42 cents for product C. Now, what we would compare that to is what we initially had under our old allocation system, where the unit gross product was $8.70 for each of product A, B, and C. So we're getting quite a different outcome and quite a different calculation of gross profit per unit for each of our products now. This suggests that there are differences in the way in which our different products are utilizing the resources. So the more we find differences when we do an activity-based application of overhead costs relative to a single factory-wide or production system-wide application of overhead costs, the more those numbers vary, the more we're potentially going to get benefit out of implementing an activity-based costing system or a similar type of costing system. Because what that's telling us is that there's some variation in the resource utilization. And importantly, what that's likely to help us do is to generate more accurate product costs, more accurate assessments of profitability, which can lead to a more profitable product mix. So that's how we'd go through a relatively detailed example of setting up an activity-based costing system, determining what the cost drivers are, determining what the allocation rates are, and then applying those to particular products. I hope you found this useful.